Welcome to velvet crimes. A trembling note in the morning air, a silver cup that sang before it killed, and a mystery that would travel from Baker Street to the heart of Vienna, where music, science, and murder converged in one impossible harmony. From where in the world are you listening tonight? Pour yourself something calm, close the door softly behind you, and listen as Dr. Watson recounts a case where sound itself became a weapon and the world nearly learned to sing its own destruction. Let the mystery begin. It began with a tremor, a faint chime that rattled the silver teacup upon our breakfast tray. Holmes, half turned toward the hearth, lifted his gaze not to the sound itself, but to the vibration that lingered upon the saucer. "You see it, Watson," he murmured, as though commenting on the weather. The ripple came from no external disturbance. I blinked, for I had heard no step upon the stair, no passing carriage. Perhaps the landlady has taken to testing her kettles with a sledgehammer. He smiled faintly, fingers poised above the rim. Observe the pattern, concentric, faintly asymmetrical. The tremor began here. He tapped the cup's base, and once again the faintest ring shivered through the air, a sound so thin it might have been imagined. Then came the knock, a single, decisive rap upon the door. Holmes straightened, the ghost of amusement vanishing from his eyes. There is our explanation, or our extension. I opened the door to a woman whose composure seemed wound upon itself like thread drawn too tight. She was dressed with a precision that denied comfort, every fold exact, every motion careful, as if the air itself might bruise her. "Mr. Holmes," she said softly, "I have been told you will listen before you judge." "That depends upon the frequency of the sound," he replied. "Pray, enter." The oral tremor seemed to follow her, a whispering resonance from her handbag, or perhaps from the nervous rhythm of her breath. She placed the object upon the table, and with it came a glint of silver. "It was my mother's," she said. "A teacup, from her last breakfast." Holmes regarded it as though it were a manuscript of confession. "And your mother?" "She died that same morning." "Cause?" "Apoplexy, they said. But she had never been ill." The faint chime sounded again, softer now, like a dying echo within the cup. Holmes inclined his head slightly, listening as a conductor might listen to an orchestra hidden behind a wall. "Watson," he said, "bring the magnifier." The lip of the teacup bore a tiny indentation, not a crack, but a puncture so delicate it might have been made by a needle's kiss. Beneath the handle, faint discoloration shimmered, not tarnish, but a residue, pale green in the light. Holmes's expression altered, almost imperceptibly. Arsenic would leave a chalk trace, but this... No, this is organic. The lady's gloved hands tightened. "You believe she was murdered?" "I believe," he said quietly, "that death does not arrive so neatly by coincidence." He asked for the name of her household, the servants who attended breakfast, the position of the window relative to the morning sun. She answered with precision, "A governess named Price, a maid named Lydia, and a gentleman lodger who occupied the upstairs room and took his tea, black always." Holmes leaned back. "And your mother?" "She was particular about her silver," came the reply. "Every morning she inspected each piece before it was used. She would not have touched it had she seen a flaw." The word flaw hung in the air like a note suspended too long. Holmes gestured toward the teacup. "Then this was meant to appear flawless. That requires forethought." He rose abruptly, drawing his dressing gown about him like a cloak. "Watson, the scent. Do you detect it?" I bent closer. There was a faint, sweet odor, neither floral nor medicinal. "Bitter almond?" I ventured. Holmes shook his head. "More subtle. Extract of foxglove, perhaps. But modified. Whoever prepared this has a chemist's ear." He turned back to our visitor. "You said the household included a lodger. What brought him under your roof?" He was a lecturer in acoustics at the Polytechnic, she said. A quiet man. My mother enjoyed his conversation. Holmes's glance flicked to the cup. Acoustics indeed. At that instant, a low vibration passed through the table once more, as if the cup remembered the frequency of the man's voice. Holmes touched the rim again. It sang faintly, high and trembling. "Watson," he said, "we may be listening to the residue of intent." He turned to the woman. "Did your lodger attend the funeral?" She hesitated. "He vanished the same day." Holmes nodded once, as though that detail were an expected harmony in an unseen composition. "Then we must follow the sound that remains." He reached for his hat. "Watson, our breakfast is concluded. The game, you might say, has begun at a higher pitch." As we stepped into the hallway, the faint ringing followed. A ghostly echo that seemed to pulse from the silver cup left cooling on the table. The echo pursued us down the narrow stairwell, its note trembling through the banister like the faint hum of a tuning fork left on the wrong frequency. Holmes moved quickly, his step measured not by haste, but by rhythm, as though following the sound rather than the case itself. "Curious," he muttered, half to himself. "A resonance without a source, persisting after the physical cause is removed. Tell me, Watson, what instrument sings after the player is gone? A violin, perhaps, if the bow lingers." "Precisely," he replied. "And if the bow were murder?" Outside, the morning air was sharp. Holmes raised his collar against it, scanning the street with that particular absorption of his, not looking for a person, but for pattern. "We go to Torrington Crescent, the lodger's last known address." "You expect him there?" "I expect silence," said Holmes, and perhaps the echo of what he left behind. The hansom rattled over the cobbles. Between the clatter of hooves and wheel, the faint vibration still seemed to pulse in my ears. That same spectral tone that had haunted the teacup. It lingered like a question, half asked. Holmes broke the rhythm with a sudden statement. "The indentation upon the silver, Watson. The puncture bore no sign of corrosion. The weapon was neither steel nor glass." "Then what, in heaven's name?" "Sound." I turned to him. "Sound." He smiled, a glint in his eyes. Our lodger was an expert in acoustics. Imagine a needle propelled not by hand, but by vibration. A tone of sufficient pitch could drive a particle through metal. Combine that with a liquid carrying a volatile extract, and you have a silent delivery system. I stared at him. "You mean to suggest that a man killed by frequency?" "By intelligence," Holmes corrected gently. Sound was merely his servant. The cab slowed. Torrington Crescent appeared, a row of respectable yet weary houses, their paint dulled by fog and years of rent. Holmes leapt down before the wheels had ceased turning. He rapped once upon the door of number 9. The latch quivered, and a timid maid appeared. "Mr. Alder?" Holmes inquired. "Gone, sir," she stammered. "Left 3 days ago, sudden-like, took nothing but a case and a violin." "A violin," Holmes repeated softly. "Of course." He stepped past her, producing his card in one swift motion that brooked no refusal. "We shall inspect the room." It was a sparse chamber, a single bed, a writing table, and on it a half-burnt candle sunk in a pool of wax. Holmes's eye caught the base of the candlestick, where a thin thread of silver dust had gathered. He drew a breath. "Watson, fetch your lens." I did so, kneeling beside him. The dust was not metal but powder, crystalline, fine, faintly iridescent. "Quinine residue," Holmes murmured. "Mixed with a binding compound. Our lodger was preparing an agent for suspension, soluble in liquid, stable in light." He moved to the window, where the glass pane bore a faint circular mark. "Here," he said, tapping it gently. The vibration sang again, unmistakable now, a thin, high tone that filled the room like a whisper of guilt. "Resonant frequency," he said. He experimented with it here. the very pitch that trembled the silver in Baker Street. I glanced about uneasily. But why poison an old woman, Holmes? What could she represent to a man of science? He looked toward the window, eyes distant. Not who she was, Watson. What she owned. He produced a small notebook from the desk drawer. Its cover bore faint pencil impressions. Equations, musical, notation, measurements. Flipping through, he paused at a final page. Resonance through containment. Proof in silver. Subject terminal. Holmes's mouth tightened. Proof. He tested it upon her. The cruelty of it struck me then. The thought of that poor lady sipping from her mother's heirloom while an invisible vibration wove death into her tea. Holmes pocketed the book. We have our scientist, but not yet our motive. He must have corresponded with someone who financed this experiment. No man works in such secrecy unless directed. From below came a clatter. The maid had dropped a pail. The sound shot up the staircase in bright metallic waves, setting the window pane quivering again. Holmes cocked his head. Hear that, Watson? Even the glass remembers him. He moved toward the door. We must visit the Polytechnic. There, perhaps, we shall find who tuned his mind to murder. The institution loomed over Regent Street, solemn and grey. Within, the corridors smelled of varnish and ozone. Holmes spoke briefly with a porter and was directed to a room marked Department of Experimental Acoustics. Inside, the hum of equipment greeted us. Tuning forks arranged like organ pipes, strings suspended in air, and curious glass vessels shaped like flasks for invisible notes. Holmes's fingers brushed one. A tone rang pure and cold. A man emerged from behind a curtain, thin, spectacled, uneasy. Dr. Fenwick, he announced. May I assist you? Holmes inclined his head. We seek one Mr. Alder, a lecturer here. Fenwick's face paled. You are too late. He resigned a week ago after an unfortunate accident. What manner of accident? One of his demonstrations shattered a pane of glass. A resonance experiment. He claimed it proved the destructive potential of sound. Holmes's gaze sharpened. Did he publish? No. He mentioned sending his findings to a patron in Vienna. Name? I believe it was... He hesitated. Professor Hans Klee, a chemist. Holmes exchanged a look with me. Vienna. Then this experiment may extend beyond curiosity. He turned to the apparatus once more, setting a small silver dish upon the table. Dr. Fenwick, indulge me. Strike this tuning fork, the lowest pitch. The doctor obeyed. The note filled the air, low, trembling, alive. The dish quivered but held firm. Now the higher, Holmes said quietly. A piercing tone followed. The silver quaked, rang, and then, with a soft, almost sorrowful sound, a crack traced its edge. Holmes smiled faintly. There, Watson. The voice that kills without speaking. Fenwick stepped back, aghast. You mean... I mean, Holmes said, that your colleague found harmony between chemistry and conscience. One destroyed the other. He turned sharply toward the door. Watson, we must locate that letter to Vienna before it becomes a passport. As we left, the shattered dish continued to hum upon the bench, a dying note that would not fade. The hum faded only as we reached the street, where Holmes drew a quick breath as though freeing himself from a pressure that had not been air, but sound itself. His cane struck sharply against the pavement, each tap landing in the same rhythm that had haunted the teacup. Watson, he said briskly, if Alder's correspondence reached Vienna, it passed through the London post first. The central office keeps all recorded dispatches of foreign delivery. We must intercept it before it crosses the channel. He hailed a cab with one motion of his arm, his tone clipped but calm, the cadence of a man racing against silence. I followed him in, the wheels immediately swallowing our voices in their grind. I asked, You believe this letter contains the formula for the poison? Not precisely. I suspect it contains an acoustic sequence, a set of frequencies, perhaps with chemical guidance, enough to reconstruct the experiment. If so, the next demonstration may not be confined to a teacup. The thought chilled me. You think it could be used as a weapon? Holmes's reply was low. Imagine an army armed with sound, a frequency that can turn the metal in a man's hand to death. Alder discovered not how to destroy, but how to penetrate. Poison was merely the proof of principle. The cab lurched to a halt before St. Martin's-le-Grand. The great postal edifice loomed, humming faintly with the sound of hundreds of pens and presses, a living machine of ink and breath. Holmes flashed his card to the superintendent, whose recognition of the name opened every door. Within the sorting room, paper rustled like wind through reeds. Holmes scanned the ledgers, his finger moving with astonishing speed. Austria, yes, here. Dispatched 2 nights past. He turned to the clerk. Was it collected? Not yet, sir. Delayed for customs examination. Still in the secure vault. Holmes's eyes lit faintly. Then Providence, for once, keeps pace with us. The vault was a modest chamber of stone and brass. The superintendent unlocked a drawer and drew out a sealed envelope, thick and bearing Alder's hand. The wax still glistened. Holmes examined the impression, a delicate emblem of a lyre crossed by a serpent. Appropriate, he murmured. Music and venom. He held it to the light. Watson, note the seal's edge, a hairline opening. It has been tested before. Tampered with. Inspected, but not opened. Whoever did so lacked the nerve to proceed. He slipped a penknife from his pocket and with a deft motion parted the wax. The paper within was folded twice, the handwriting precise, the ink faintly perfumed. That same subtle sweetness we had detected upon the teacup. Holmes unfolded it carefully. The page was filled not with words but with notation. Staves of music intertwined with numerals and symbols. Good heavens, I whispered. It's not a letter, it's a score. Holmes studied it, eyes narrowing. A score designed not for performance, but for demonstration. Each note corresponds to a frequency. Each rest marks the interval of vibration. See here. The notation descends below the range of hearing. This is no melody, it is instruction. He replaced the sheet gently. Watson, we are in possession of a murder composed like a symphony. Before I could reply, the superintendent's attention was drawn to a movement at the far door. A messenger boy lingered there, pale, anxious, his uniform smudged with soot. Beg pardon, sir, he said. There's a gentleman waiting outside. Said this letter was his property. Asked me to fetch it discreet-like. Holmes turned sharply. Describe him. Tall, sir, fair hair, foreign accent. Had a violin case. Holmes's voice dropped. Alder. He moved toward the rear exit. Watson, quietly. If we are swift, we may yet overtake the overture. We slipped into the alley behind the post office. The fog pressed low, blurring sound into shape. From beyond the corner came a faint scrape, the click of a latch, then the unmistakable low tuning of strings. Holmes motioned for silence, his hand rising like a conductor before a dangerous refrain. We turned the corner together. There he stood, a figure half swallowed by mist, the violin beneath his chin, the bow poised. His eyes glowed with that peculiar fever of the scientific idealist, part genius, part ruin. Mr. Alder, Holmes said evenly, you tune your instrument to a deadly pitch. The man's bow trembled but did not lower. You do not understand, Mr. Holmes. I sought harmony, not harm. Her death was an error of amplitude. An error that killed, Holmes returned. You used sound to pierce metal, then liquid to carry poison through it. A symphony of cruelty. Alder's mouth twisted. Cruelty. You call discovery cruel. The world will thank me when the deaf hear through vibration. when illness is cured by resonance. But England laughed, so I sent my work to Vienna, where men less scrupulous might weaponize it, said Holmes. The violin's tone swelled faintly. Progress requires risk. Holmes took one step forward. Then risk your freedom by surrendering. End this now, before the next frequency breaks more than glass. Alder's eyes narrowed. You think to silence me? Sound cannot be contained. His bow drew across the strings. A piercing note burst through the fog, thin, crystalline, unbearable. The very lamppost beside us quivered, and the brass rail of the post office shivered in response. The letter in Holmes's hand fluttered violently. Holmes lunged, striking the violin aside. The bow snapped, and the sound died with a metallic whimper. Alder staggered back, breathing hard, his expression one of despair, not rage. It was beautiful, he whispered. She should have heard it as I did. Holmes seized him by the wrist. You will have time to explain your melody before a less sympathetic audience. As we turned him toward the street, the faint resonance still trembled in the air. A dying harmonic, fragile and persistent. Holmes stopped, listening. Curious, he murmured. Even broken, the note continues. He has tuned the city itself. And indeed, beneath the clatter of carriages, I could hear it. That same lingering tone from Baker Street, stretched now across London like a thread of invisible wire. Holmes's expression darkened. This was no single act, Watson. It was the first movement of something larger. The fog seemed to thrum in response, the air alive with an unseen pulse. The fog quivered as though London itself drew breath, each distant carriage wheel setting loose a faint vibration that wound around us like an unseen refrain. Holmes tightened his grip on Alder's wrist, his gaze fixed not upon the man, but upon the trembling air. Listen, Watson, he said quietly. He has woven his experiment into the world's own heartbeat. The sound we hear is not echo, but infection. Alder's tone turned feverish. You cannot unmake it now. Every pane, every rail, every wire carries the frequency. My work has escaped me. It lives. Holmes's face remained composed, though I saw the muscle tighten in his jaw. You speak of resonance as if it were a contagion. What medium transmits it? The gas lines, Alder whispered. The pipes beneath us. I calibrated their diameter. Each one hums in sympathy. Good God, I said. Then the entire city is an instrument, Holmes finished grimly, an orchestra awaiting its conductor. Alder laughed softly, the sound half a sob. You see, she heard it first, poor woman. The tone needed purity of silver. I never meant— Holmes interrupted him sharply. Enough sentiment. Watson, summon Inspector Lestrade to meet us at Baker Street within the hour. We must intercept whatever score remains before the next performance begins. Alder stiffened. You cannot keep me there. My resonance will travel. Holmes met his eyes coolly. Then we shall insulate you, Mr. Alder. The silence of stone is most instructive. We brought him by cab under discreet guard, Holmes seated opposite him, fingertips pressed together, eyes half closed as if conducting a private calculation. The tone persisted through the motion of the wheels, faint yet persistent, resonating in the carriage window whenever we passed the hollow of a tunnel. Holmes broke the silence at last. Alder, if you wished only to prove your principle, why transmit the data abroad? Because England fears progress, the man replied bitterly. Vienna listens. Klee promised funding, recognition, replication. I gave him the first movement. He will complete the symphony. Holmes's eyes opened. Then your letter was only a prelude. The experiment continues, Alder said. Even now. At that, Holmes rapped twice on the roof, halting the cab before our door. Watson, bring him below. He will not see daylight until I know how far his notes have traveled. Within our sitting room, the silver teacup still glimmered where it had been left, a silent witness to the morning's beginnings. Holmes gestured toward it. You hear nothing now?" I strained my ear. The tone had faded, replaced by the tick of the mantel clock. "Good," he murmured. "The cup's resonance ceases once removed from the network of pipes. Proof that his transmission rides the city's breath, not the air." Alder, seated under guard, looked almost relieved. "Then you admit its brilliance?" "I admit its danger," Holmes retorted. "But danger often masquerades as innovation." He turned to me. "Watson, the map upon the mantel. Fetch it." Spreading it across the table, he marked a line of crimson from Baker Street to the Polytechnic and onward toward the postal district. The gas mains trace his pathway precisely. Each node forms an acoustic relay. Lestrade arrived then, stamping his boots against the chill. "You've got the fellow, have you?" "For the moment," said Holmes. "But the real threat hums beneath our feet. We must silence it before it finds voice." Lestrade frowned. Silence the gas lines? That'd paralyze half of London. Holmes tapped his finger upon a junction marked in ink. "Not all. Only the one nearest Aldersgate. That section feeds the Polytechnic's supply. If Alder's frequency continues to propagate, that node will amplify it." Alder gave a short, hysterical laugh. "You can't silence what you cannot hear." Holmes turned to him, voice quiet as a blade drawn from its sheath. "On the contrary, I intend to play your note back to you." He vanished into the bedroom and returned moments later with his Stradivarius, an instrument he rarely touched except in the dark intervals of thought. "Watson," he said, tightening the strings, "observe carefully. Each sound, however perilous, may be met by its counterpoint." Alder stared, transfixed. "You would fight sound with sound." "Precisely. Two opposing frequencies will cancel one another if struck in perfect opposition. You have created a curse, sir. I propose to compose its cure." He drew the bow gently across the strings. The first note hung soft, tentative. Then another joined it, low and tremulous. The air in the room seemed to shift. The very glass of the window ceased its subtle tremor. Holmes adjusted the tuning peg fraction by fraction, his ear attuned to a dimension I could scarcely comprehend. "There. Do you feel it, Watson?" "The pressure. The balance," he corrected. "We are nearing silence's edge." But Alder's expression changed, fear replacing fascination. "Stop! You'll disrupt the harmonic field. It will rebound." Holmes ignored him. The bow drew a final, measured stroke, and with it the air itself seemed to exhale. The faint vibration that had haunted us since morning fell utterly still. For one heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, from below the street, there came a muffled report, a dull metallic thud, as though some great valve had slammed shut. Lestrade started. "What the devil was that?" Holmes lowered the violin. "Equilibrium," he said softly. "The pipes have silenced themselves." Alder slumped forward, his voice hollow. "You've undone everything." "Not quite," Holmes replied. "The design remains within your mind and within Cleese. Until we reach Vienna, the composition is unfinished." He turned to me. "Watson, note the time. The first performance ends here, but the encore lies abroad." Even as he spoke, the mantel clock gave a strange fluttering buzz, its mechanism shuddering as though catching the dying echo of some distant note. Holmes leaned toward it, listening. The hum returned, faint but unmistakable, running through the brass frame like a whisper of persistence. He looked up slowly. The sound survives in metal memory. Alder's tone is not dead. It sleeps. Lestrade cursed under his breath. "Then what do we do now?" Holmes's eyes had that faraway glint once more. "We wake it carefully. The next step, gentlemen, will require an air sharper than fear and steadier than guilt." The clock's trembling deepened to a thin, continuous ring that bled into the walls, a sound at once delicate and insidious. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, pulsing beneath the city's skin. Holmes's hand hovered above the violin again, but he did not play. "Listen, Watson," he whispered. "London is answering." The vibration thickened until even the air seemed to pulse, as if London's heart had shifted beneath our very room. Holmes stood motionless beside the mantel clock, his ear almost touching the brass frame. "Fascinating," he murmured. "It has chosen a lower register. The city is adapting its resonance." Lestrade swore softly. "Adapting? You make it sound alive." Holmes turned, expression taut with thought. "Perhaps it is, in the sense that a flame adapts to the fuel that feeds it. Alder's tone found the gas mains. Now it seeks the earth's hollows. Watson, do you hear that sub-harmonic beneath the clock's ring?" I listened and caught a faint droning beneath the dominant note, a slow, almost human sigh. "What is it?" "The echo from below," Holmes said. "Our floorboards are responding. Alder, when did you first calibrate your instrument to the mains?" The prisoner's voice came thin and defensive. "A month past. I tested the resonance through the cellars of my lodging. The pipes carried it splendidly." "Indeed," Holmes said grimly. "You have turned every basement into a sounding box." Lestrade gestured toward the floor. "You think it's coming, from under us?" Holmes nodded. "And if so, it means the tone has found an anchor. Watson, fetch the lantern. We are going down." Alder made a desperate motion. "You must not. Disturb the frequency and it may cascade." Holmes gave him a curt smile. "Then pray it does, for I intend to disturb it most violently." The descent into Mrs. Hudson's cellar was narrow and steep, the light trembling in my hand with each footfall. The hum grew stronger the lower we went, until it seemed to travel through my bones. Even Lestrade's breathing fell into rhythm with it. Holmes crouched near the coal bin, studying the flagstones. "Note this vibration, Watson. It rises precisely at this joint. The source lies beneath." He pressed his ear to the stone, then straightened with sudden resolve. "We lift it." The inspector and I pried at the slab until it came loose with a groan. From the darkness below came a surge of sound, deeper now, as if some buried creature stirred. Holmes lowered the lantern. "Good Lord," I whispered. Beneath us, a small brass cylinder gleamed within the cavity, connected to a thin wire that ran along the wall and vanished toward the street. The device pulsed faintly, the metal shimmering in time with the city's unseen rhythm. Holmes reached in carefully. "A resonator," he said. "Crude, but ingenious. Alder must have planted it during his earlier visits. It amplifies and retransmits the tone through the mains." Alder's voice trembled from above. "It was a prototype. I never thought it would persist beyond its power source." Holmes inspected the wire. "It feeds upon vibration itself, a parasitic circuit, self-sustaining, self-replicating. Remarkable." Lestrade muttered. "Then how do we stop the blasted thing?" Holmes drew his violin bow from his coat. "By finding its opposite once more. Watson, note the frequency. Low, about 110 vibrations per second. If I produce a counterwave." He tuned his string by ear, the lantern light catching the tense line of his jaw. The note he drew forth was almost inaudible at first, a ghost against the deeper hum. Then the two sounds began to interfere, creating ripples of silence that moved through the cellar like invisible wind. Alder shouted, "No, you'll unbalance it." Holmes's voice remained calm. "Balance is precisely my intention." The hum wavered, dropped, then surged again, angrier, as though resisting him. The lantern flickered wildly. Lestrade clutched the rail. "Holmes, it's getting louder." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Then we are close." He drew the bow faster, pressing harder. The tones clashed, fused, and suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. For a moment, I thought the world had lost its sound entirely. Then, faintly, the city above us sighed, a single low exhalation as the resonance released its hold. Holmes exhaled too, lowering the violin. Extinguished. But as we began to replace the stone, I noticed something gleaming in the cavity's dust, a folded scrap of paper wedged beneath the cylinder. I handed it to Holmes. He unfolded it under the lantern's glow. "Watson," he said quietly. Our lodger was not the first to conduct this experiment. The note was written in a different hand, elegant, continental. Holmes read aloud. "The pitch succeeds only when alloyed with mercury salts. The human ear will fail, but the bones will hear. H.K." "Professor Klee," Holmes murmured. "He has refined the process already." Alder stared at the note as though seeing his own epitaph. He betrayed me. I sent him only half the data. He must have reconstructed the rest. Holmes slipped the paper into his pocket and improved upon it. This mention of mercury salts implies biological resonance, perhaps even control through auditory induction. The man may seek not destruction, but dominion. Lestrade scowled. "Dominion through a sound no one can hear? Devilish nonsense." Holmes's tone was grave. "Nonsense has a way of becoming law when science outpaces conscience. Klee means to conduct his own symphony, and London was merely his tuning fork." A faint tapping interrupted us. The clock above, muffled by the floor but audible nonetheless. The sound had changed. Slower, uneven, almost like a heartbeat. Holmes lifted the lantern, listening. "There. Do you hear? The resonance remains dormant, but it is not gone." Alder clutched the bars of his chair. "He's found it already. Klee has taken the pattern abroad. He'll broadcast from Vienna. You cannot stop it now." Holmes straightened, expression unreadable. "We shall see. Lestrade, have this device sealed and sent to Scotland Yard's laboratory. I shall wire the Foreign Office at once. If Klee transmits from Vienna, we must be there before his first note is played." He extinguished the lantern. Darkness folded around us like a curtain at the end of an act. As we ascended the steps, the faint pulse continued beneath the floorboards, soft, regular, and alive. Holmes paused on the threshold, his hand resting upon the doorframe. "Watson," he said, "remember this sound. When we hear it again, it will not be in London." The floor gave a final, hollow tremor, and the teacup upon our breakfast tray answered with a single, fragile chime. The fragile chime still hung in the air when Holmes turned abruptly toward the writing desk. "Watson, the telegraph." His hand moved with the rapid precision of a man composing both letter and strategy at once. "To Foreign Office. Urgent. Notify British Legation, Vienna. Locate Professor Hans Klee, chemist. Suspect engaged in experimental transmissions of acoustic energy with potential lethal consequence." He signed the message and struck the bell. Within minutes, a messenger was on his way through the fog. Holmes remained standing, eyes unfocused, as if listening to vibrations only he could perceive. "Holmes," I said quietly, "you believe Klee has already activated this device abroad?" He nodded. "The interval between the London resonance and its echo beneath our floorboards suggests distance. I estimate the secondary pulse originated eastward, crossing the Channel and continental pipes. It is faint now, but growing stronger. We have perhaps 48 hours before the full harmonic awakens." Alder gave a broken laugh. "You think you can cross Europe and stop sound itself?" Holmes regarded him with calm disdain. "Sound may be intangible, Mr. Alder, but its makers are not." He moved toward the window. "Watson, pack a small case. We take the night train to Dover. From there, Calais, Brussels, and on to Vienna." Lestrade frowned. "And me?" "You will remain here to monitor the city. If the resonance rises again, destroy the resonator completely. I have faith in your less delicate methods." Alder leaned forward. You cannot leave me here with him. Holmes's tone hardened. You will remain under guard until I send for you. Consider it an enforced intermission. By evening we were aboard the steamer, London already dissolving into mist behind us. Holmes stood on deck, unmoving, the wind carrying the low hum of the engines. I caught him tapping the railing lightly, his fingers seeking rhythm. You hear it still, I said. Not here, he corrected. Feel. The pitch rides the iron. Clee has already begun transmitting. Do you notice, Watson, how even the gulls avoid our wake? The sea stretched grey and endless, yet through its movement a steady vibration pulsed, almost imperceptible. Holmes closed his eyes briefly. At this frequency, resonance can pass through metal and water alike. The entire continent is one continuous instrument. He turned suddenly. The code in Alder's letter, the musical score. I've memorized its sequence. Each bar corresponds to a city's frequency. London, Brussels, Munich, Vienna. He plotted the line of propagation like notes upon a staff. Clee intends a culmination where they converge. In Vienna. Precisely. The imperial capital, with its concert halls, its electrical laboratories, its gas networks, all tuned to human vanity and steel. His mouth tightened. He will not merely demonstrate. He will perform. The rhythm of the train through the night was a relentless percussion, each wheel striking sparks that vanished before they could cool. Holmes sat opposite me, papers strewn across his lap, translating numerals into musical intervals. Observe, Watson, he said, sketching swiftly. This sequence, G sharp, B flat, C. Do you see the pattern? Each note descends by a minor third. That is not composition, it is calibration. The difference between frequencies produces a beat tone, the exact pitch of the London resonance. I frowned. Then Clee has replicated Alder's discovery and extended it. The harmonic interference will not merely destroy, it will synchronize. Every resonant metal object within range will respond. Pipes, rails, bells, perhaps even the human skull. The thought made me shudder. What purpose could such horror serve? Holmes's eyes lifted briefly from the page. Control, perhaps. Fear, or simply the triumph of intellect unburdened by morality. Science, Watson, when stripped of conscience, becomes but another form of music, louder and crueler. The train plunged through a tunnel, the sound swelling to a roar. For a heartbeat, the vibration matched the London tone perfectly. Holmes's head snapped up. There. You felt that? I nodded. The very carriage had trembled, our glasses clinking like anxious teeth. Resonance building eastward, he said. He must have already installed transmitters along the railway. Ingenious. Europe's arteries will carry his melody. By the time we reached Vienna, dawn had begun to pale the sky. The city shimmered beneath a veil of frost, every rooftop gleaming like an instrument awaiting touch. Holmes wasted no time. To the Akademie der Wissenschaften, he instructed the driver. Clee holds a chair there in chemical acoustics. At the gates, a porter confirmed the professor's absence. He has taken leave for demonstration at the Imperial Conservatory, he said. Tonight, 9 o'clock. New symphonic invention, he called it. Holmes's lips curved faintly. So he dresses murder in melody. We secured lodgings near the Kertner Tor Theatre. Throughout the day, Holmes paced, notebook in hand, translating the resonance into counterpoints. Each time a carriage passed outside, the window panes gave a faint, answering tremor. At last, as dusk deepened, Holmes set down his pen. Watson, we attend this performance. Bring the revolver, though I hope we shall fight not with lead, but with reason. Do you have a plan? I have a possibility, he said. If Clee's frequency follows the same scale, one note reversed may suffice to shatter the chain. but it must be struck at the precise instant he reaches the final bar. He paused, listening as the faint hum returned through the glass. The city is already tuning. Night descended with theatrical calm. The conservatory gleamed like a jewel, its chandeliers flickering upon brass and silk. Every guest seemed to hum unconsciously, caught by the vibration that seeped through the marble. Holmes and I took seats near the rear. Upon the stage stood an array of instruments, none familiar. Tubes, metal discs, a vast coiled apparatus like an organ skeleton. At its center, Professor Hans Klee, tall, white-haired, eyes gleaming behind gold spectacles. Holmes whispered, "Observe the coils, gas-fed resonators. He means to amplify through the mains themselves." Klee raised his baton. The audience stilled. A single note emerged, pure, immense, unlike any sound I had known. The walls quivered. The chandeliers trembled like frightened stars. Holmes leaned forward, voice a thread. "Second movement begins at G-sharp. Prepare." The sound climbed, layered, alive. The air thickened until breathing itself became rhythmic. Somewhere behind the walls, pipes moaned in sympathy. Klee smiled. "Gentlemen," he called, "tonight we hear the voice of matter itself." Holmes rose slowly, hand upon his violin case. "Then let matter answer," he whispered. He stepped into the aisle, his figure poised against the rising storm of sound. The audience watched, frozen as he drew his bow and released a single counter note. It cut through the hall like light through smoke. The great coils shuddered, the chandeliers burst into motion, and from beneath the stage came a low, resonant growl that felt like the earth itself preparing to sing. The growl deepened until every surface in the hall seemed to breathe with it, wood, glass, and flesh alike vibrating in dreadful unison. Holmes's note met Klee's with a blinding clash of harmonics. The chandelier above us burst into 1,000 trembling crystals that tinkled down like a deadly rain. Holmes did not flinch. "Hold fast, Watson," he cried above the sound. "If he completes his scale, the building will become a tuning fork." Klee's eyes burned with manic delight. "At last," he shouted. "You see it, Holmes, universal resonance. The union of physics and art." "The union of folly and death," Holmes retorted. He adjusted his pitch fractionally, the violin shrieking in answer. The opposing waves met, cancelled, and rebounded. The walls flexed visibly, the gas lamps flickering as their mantles strained under invisible pressure. People fled in terror, but many collapsed mid-aisle, struck dumb by the vibration that stole their balance. My own teeth ached with the force of it. I seized Holmes's arm, shouting, "You'll bring the ceiling down." He shook me off, eyes blazing. Better dust than domination. For an instant, the two tones wavered, seeking supremacy. Then Klee, wild-eyed, seized a lever on his machine and thrust it forward. The pitch rose into a shriek that pierced the skull, beyond hearing yet felt in every nerve. Holmes staggered, bow slipping. The room tilted, even the stage floor buckled. Klee stood amidst the chaos like a prophet consumed by his revelation. "Do you hear it, Holmes? The perfect note, one sound to bind them all." Holmes's face hardened. "Then let it break you first." He drew one final stroke. Short, sharp, immaculate. A counter-frequency, pure and narrow as a scalpel, sliced through Klee's resonance. The professor's machine screamed, the metal coils twisting inward, devouring their own sound. There came a thunderous implosion, not of fire, but of silence, absolute, suffocating, magnificent. When I awoke, I was on the stage floor. Dust drifted through the motionless air. The instruments lay scattered like carcasses. The center, Klee knelt, clutching his ears, his expression rapturous and broken. Holmes stood over him, the violin still trembling in his hand. One string snapped. "Your symphony is concluded," he said quietly. Clee lowered his hand slowly, his voice hoarse. "You have destroyed the resonance. Do you realize what you've done?" Holmes regarded him without triumph. "Prevented the city from singing itself to death, I trust." Clee shook his head. "No. You have silenced the universe. The frequency was perfect. It would have harmonized matter, not shattered it." Holmes's voice softened to pity. "The line between harmony and havoc, Professor, is thinner than the edge of your bow. You mistook vibration for virtue." He turned to me. "Watson, see to the audience. Many will have fainted from auditory shock." As I moved among them, the silence felt unnatural, dense, expectant. No cough, no rustle, only the faint tinkling of broken glass. Holmes crouched beside the wreckage, examining the ruined coils. "Observe," he said when I returned. "The alloy has fused from within. It is not melted, but reorganized." His resonance altered the molecular lattice. Had it continued, the entire structure of the hall might have rearranged. Clee's voice drifted from the shadows. "It did rearrange, Holmes. It began with her." Holmes turned sharply. "Her. The woman who died from the poisoned cup," Clee said. "Alder's subject. She heard the first note. Her heartbeat synchronized with it. She was the first to prove the possibility of human resonance." Holmes's face darkened. "So she was not collateral, but experiment." Clee smiled faintly. "A necessary sacrifice. Alder lacked courage. He used poison to simulate what he could have achieved with purity of tone. But you—" He lifted his gaze. "You understood the counterpoint. You could complete my work." Holmes's hand closed around the violin's neck. "If perfection means the annihilation of conscience, then you are already complete, Professor." Clee rose unsteadily, stepping closer. "You can silence me, but not the frequency. It lingers. Even now you hear it." Holmes froze. I felt it too, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor, emanating not from the ruined machinery, but from somewhere deep beneath the boards. Clee's smile widened. "It travels through foundation and stone. I sent the prototype to multiple sites. Each will awaken in sequence." Holmes seized him by the collar. "Where?" "You will never find them all," Clee whispered. "They are built into the world." Holmes released him abruptly. "Then I must begin with the nearest." He turned to me, voice calm again, though his eyes burned with cold fury. "Watson, bring the violin and the tuning fork. We are not finished." The inspector from Vienna, newly arrived with his men, entered the ruined hall at that moment. "Herr Holmes, the ground. Do you feel it?" Indeed, we did. The marble trembled with a slow, rolling pulse. 3 beats, pause, then 3 again. Not random, but rhythmic, deliberate. Holmes listened intently. "It is Morse code," he said. "He is transmitting words." The inspector gaped. "From where?" "Beneath us." We followed the sound to the sub-basement. There, amid ancient stone foundations, we found a smaller resonator, pulsing with eerie regularity. Its tone was lower than before, but within it I could hear a faint pattern. Dot, dash, dash, dot. Holmes bent close. "Klee," he murmured. "He signs his name upon the air." He reached for the tuning fork, struck it lightly, and placed it beside the device. The vibration shifted, faltered. He struck it again, this time in a higher key. The pattern stuttered, then stopped. Holmes exhaled. "So ends the signature." But the stillness that followed was heavier than silence. The walls seemed to listen, the stones absorbing what had been said. Clee laughed softly behind us. "You cannot erase sound, Holmes. It lives in memory. Even the dead will hear it." Holmes turned to him slowly. "Perhaps, but not tonight." He snapped the resonator's wire with a swift motion. The hum ceased. For the first time since Baker Street, true silence returned, clean, immense, final. And yet, as we ascended the stairs, a faint echo drifted after us. Not mechanical, but human, the audience above, beginning to stir, their whispers forming a rhythm that seemed oddly familiar, like the fading memory of a song that refused to die. Holmes paused at the doorway, head tilted. "Do you hear it, Watson?" "Yes," I said softly. "The city again." "No," he replied. "The aftermath." Holmes's words hung between us, the faint human murmur swelling into something half musical, half mournful. It rose through the broken conservatory, like the ghost of Klee's symphony, as though the crowd above unconsciously carried fragments of that forbidden rhythm. He turned sharply to the inspector. "Clear the hall. Every listener is now a transmitter." The Austrian bristled. "Surely the danger is finished." "Danger," Holmes said, "rarely dies at the same instant as its maker." We moved through the corridors, the audience drifting out in dazed silence. I caught snatches of humming, tuneless, involuntary. Holmes quickened his pace. "You see, Watson, the ear remembers. A vibration does not end with the sound, but continues in nerve and bone." "You mean they've been infected?" He frowned. "Influenced, at least. The frequency Klee employed may have established sympathetic resonance within the auditory system. A sonic contagion, his final bequest." Klee, handcuffed, was led past us. His expression bore neither remorse nor triumph, only an eerie serenity. "You misunderstand me, Holmes," he said softly. "It was never about destruction. It was about continuity." Holmes's tone cut through like steel. "Continuity of madness, perhaps. Even silence trembles with your ego." The professor inclined his head. "And yet you feel it too." For a moment, I thought Holmes might strike him. Instead, he turned away. "Take him to the Hofburg cells. Ensure absolute isolation. Stone walls, no metal fittings, no echoes." As they led Klee off, Holmes motioned for me to follow. "We must confirm the propagation." "Where?" "The city itself." Outside, Vienna seemed preternaturally still. Snow had begun to fall, muffling the streets, but through the hush I caught faint vibrations. The rattle of a lamp-post, the quiver of a window latch. The resonance, though diminished, was everywhere. Holmes paused beside a wrought iron railing, pressed his gloved fingers to it, and closed his eyes. "The amplitude is declining, but the pattern persists. The energy has dispersed into the infrastructure." He drew a small tuning fork from his pocket, struck it lightly against the post, and listened. The sound met the lingering vibration, producing a low, throbbing beat, 2 pulses slightly out of phase. Holmes counted them under his breath. 73 to 76 hertz, he murmured. Exactly the frequency of the human voice at rest. Klee has tuned the world to speak. I felt a chill not born of the snow. Then this infection could spread wherever metal carries sound. "Not merely metal," Holmes said. "Thought, habit, even rhythm of breath. Once introduced, a resonance becomes metaphor. That is the true danger. The city hums not because of physics, but because it remembers." He began walking, swiftly now, tracing the vibration through the streets like a physician tracking a fever. Each turn brought new faint echoes, an awning chain trembling, a carriage lamp vibrating softly against its hook. The noise was subtle, insidious, almost melodic. Holmes stopped at a narrow square dominated by a fountain frozen in mid-spray. "Listen." The wind shifted, and through the frozen pipes there came a faint, continuous hum. Holmes leaned close. "There lies the final relay. Klee distributed his resonators through the city's waterworks. Clever. Sound travels through liquid with far greater efficiency than air." I stared at the fountain. "Then Vienna itself will keep his experiment alive." "Unless," said Holmes, "we break the pattern before it ossifies into permanence." He turned abruptly. "Watson, Recall the counter-frequency I employed at the conservatory. If I reproduce it within this medium, we may erase the memory of Clee's tone. But you have no violin? Holmes smiled faintly. I have yours. From his coat he withdrew the small travel instrument I had carried unwittingly since our departure from London. An indulgence of habit, he said, and perhaps Providence. He tuned swiftly, the notes thin and trembling in the cold air. The first stroke of the bow drew a sound so pure it seemed to make the snow itself hesitate. The fountain answered with a faint harmonic whine. Holmes adjusted the pitch until both tones merged, producing an oscillation that vibrated through the square like the breath of the city itself. The air thickened. Windows shuddered. A carriage horse reared, startled by vibrations beyond its hearing. Holmes continued, eyes closed, guiding the invisible duel between tone and memory. The hum rose higher, then faltered. The fountain's resonance cracked, a sharp splintering sound like breaking glass. And then, silence. Holmes lowered the bow, his breath visible in the frozen air. It is done. The square stood utterly still. No echo lingered. Even the gas lamps burned without flicker. I exhaled. You've silenced Vienna. He shook his head gently. No, Watson. I've restored it to its rightful key. He tapped the fountain's rim. No sound replied. Every city has its bass note. Clee's was unnatural, an imposition. It required resistance to end it. We turned toward the inn. Along the way the quiet deepened until even our footsteps seemed sacrilegious. Holmes spoke again, softly now. You see, Watson, sound is memory. A vibration in air, yes, but also in conscience. Clee sought eternity through resonance. What he achieved was only repetition. I said, and repetition, like guilt, demands ending. He gave a brief smile. Precisely. At the inn door, a courier awaited with a sealed telegram. Holmes tore it open and read aloud. London secure. Alder confessed. Claims Clee sent second wave through continental wires. Prepare for possible resurgence. Holmes's expression darkened. Second wave, through telegraph channels. Of course, the man has encoded his frequencies as electric impulses. I felt the old thrill of dread return. Then even silence may not save us. Perhaps not, he said, but silence too can be weaponized. He folded the message neatly. We return to London at once. If the city sleeps under another tone, I mean to wake it on my own terms. The courier, still lingering, pointed toward the square we had left. Sir, listen. From far behind us, a faint metallic sound began to rise. The shivering of lamp-posts, the trembling of window frames. Not the same pitch as before, but slower, more deliberate, like the rhythm of a pulse preparing to quicken. Holmes's eyes lifted toward the darkened horizon. It begins again, he murmured. A new composition. The lamp-posts quivered like tuning forks, their light flickering in perfect rhythm. Holmes's jaw tightened. He has changed the medium, he said, almost to himself. The second wave rides not upon air or water, but upon current. I watched the trembling lines overhead. The telegraph network. He nodded grimly. Electricity obeys the same laws as sound, only faster. Clee, or some disciple, has converted resonance into impulse. Each transmission now hums with his rhythm. The courier stepped back, crossing himself. You mean the wires sing? Not sing, Holmes replied. Whisper. He turned sharply toward me. Watson, there is no time for luggage. The midnight express to Calais, go. We were moving before thought caught up. The rhythmic hum accompanied us through the cobbled streets, the sound following like the city's pulse. Inside the carriage, Holmes leaned toward the window, listening intently to the faint vibration running through the glass. Note it, Watson, he said. Every electric light in the city flickers in identical sequence. 3, pause. 3, pause. The pattern is no longer Morse. It is music. I stared. But how can current convey music? By modulation of frequency. Klee has embedded a tone within the line. Every telegraph office, every signal box from here to London will carry the hum. If uncorrected, it could destabilize the entire system, perhaps even ignite a sympathetic vibration in the city's power grid. Good heavens! Holmes's mouth curved faintly. An apt phrase, for heaven itself may soon tremble. The train roared into motion, cutting through the Austrian darkness. Holmes sat motionless, fingertips drumming upon his knee, keeping time with the steady rhythm in the rails. He must have had assistance, he said suddenly. Klee is confined, Alder under guard, yet the signal persists. Someone carries his legacy. I recalled the Vienna inspector's startled expression at the conservatory. One of his students? Undoubtedly. Genius rarely blooms in isolation. It breeds disciples. Holmes's gaze turned inward. And what better camouflage for a messenger of vibration than the telegraph operator himself? He produced his pocket diary, scribbling calculations as the train swayed. The first detectable pulse began an hour after Klee's arrest. If the signal originated in Vienna, the relay would reach Brussels by now, Calais within the hour. It will cross the channel precisely as we do. Then London, he finished for me, will wake to a new hum before dawn. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels intensified until it seemed to merge with that hidden undercurrent, each metallic strike an echo of the city's trembling voice. Holmes rose suddenly, moved to the corridor, and pressed his ear to the wall. "It travels through the carriage itself," he said. "The line beneath us conducts it. Watson, strike the brass railing." I obeyed. The rail answered with a faint, resonant tone. E flat. Holmes's eyes sharpened. The same frequency as Alder's teacup. "So the wave has found its original pitch," I said. "Indeed. The experiment continues full circle. Klee's symphony will end where Alder's began, in London." He paced the narrow aisle. "He has weaponized communication, Watson. Every telegram is now a note in his unfinished score. Can it be stopped?" He paused, his expression a mixture of grim fascination and fatigue. "Perhaps. The line must be retuned, its electrical pulse inverted. But to do so requires access to the central relay at St. Martin's-le-Grand. That's where Alder's letter first passed," I recalled. Holmes's mouth curved into a smile that was almost melancholy. "Yes." The circle closes neatly. We reached Calais before dawn, the wind sharp and laden with static. At the port telegraph station, the clerk sat half asleep beside his instruments, unaware that every click of the sounder was part of something larger. Holmes stepped behind the counter, his tone crisp. "Observe, Watson. The rhythm has accelerated. 2 short, 1 long, then silence. The signal repeats every 20 seconds. He's testing amplitude." He adjusted a coil on the device. The clicks slowed, shifted pitch, then steadied. "There," he murmured. "He's compensating for distance. The current grows stronger as it approaches the channel." The clerk stared, bewildered. It hums, monsieur. Always hums." Holmes nodded. "That hum is the prelude to catastrophe." We boarded the steamer moments later. The sea below seemed alive, every swell flickering faintly with phosphorescence that pulsed to the same rhythm. I could almost feel it in the marrow of my bones. Holmes stood at the rail, eyes fixed on the horizon. Sound, water, current, all converging. We ride upon the resonance itself. When at last we reached Dover, the dawn light revealed telegraph poles vibrating gently against the sky. The wires stretched inland like strings upon a colossal instrument. Holmes turned to me. "Watson, I will need your steadiness. This may prove the most delicate operation of my career." "Name the task." "We go to St. Martin's. There I shall intercept the signal at its heart. If my counterwave fails, London's entire network may discharge simultaneously. And if it succeeds, then silence will mean victory. By midday we stood once again in the vast postal vault where Alder's cursed letter had first rested. The superintendent recognized us with a mixture of relief and dread. "Mr. Holmes? The wires. They've been acting queerly since morning. Vibrations through the walls, lights flickering. We were about to cut the main power." "Do so, and you may amplify the interference," Holmes replied. "Leave everything as it is. I must tune the system to its own salvation." He approached the central relay table, where a dozen telegraph lines converged in a tangle of copper. The instruments trembled visibly, their needles twitching to an invisible rhythm. The hum filled the chamber, low and persistent, identical to the note that had haunted our every step. Holmes drew from his pocket a small tuning fork, the same that had silenced Clee's resonator, and placed it upon the metal casing. It sang faintly in sympathy. "Watson, hold this steady." He adjusted the resistance on the coil, matching its pulse to the hum. Slowly, the two sounds aligned. The floor itself seemed to breathe. "Now," Holmes said, "when I invert the polarity, the frequency will reflect upon itself. If my calculations hold, the echo will collapse the wave." I swallowed. "And if they don't?" He smiled without humor. "Then London shall hum for eternity." He threw the switch. A blinding flash filled the vault, followed by a crack of thunder that was not thunder at all, but the scream of energy collapsing into itself. The instruments burst into light. Sparks leapt across the wires like miniature lightning. For an instant, the sound rose to an unbearable pitch, then vanished. Every lamp went dark. Every wire stilled. Holmes stood motionless, his hand still upon the lever. "Watson," he whispered, "tell me what you hear." "Nothing," I said. "Utter silence." He exhaled, closing his eyes. "Then we have retuned the world." But even as the words left him, a faint metallic drip echoed from somewhere deep within the vault. A slow, measured sound, deliberate as thought itself. Holmes opened his eyes. "No," he said softly. "The world is listening back." The drip became a rhythm, slow, deliberate, and horribly precise. Each fall of metal upon stone carried an echo that lingered just a fraction too long, as though the vault itself resisted forgetting. Holmes lifted his head, every muscle listening. "It persists," he murmured. "The waveform should have collapsed entirely. Something remains active." I stared at the cables. "Residual current?" He shook his head. "No. The pattern is too ordered. This is repetition, not residue." The superintendent, pale with fear, whispered, "Mr. Holmes, it's coming from the service conduit." Holmes seized a lantern and knelt beside the iron panel at the room's edge. "Help me with this, Watson." Together we pried the cover loose. Within the narrow passage gleamed a coil of fine silver wire, the same alloy we had seen in Alder's cup and Clee's devices, twisting like a metallic serpent through the darkness. Holmes's voice dropped to a whisper. "He left a relay within the relay. The man built redundancy into his madness." The hum thickened. I felt it in my ribs now, a second heartbeat that wasn't mine. Holmes unspooled a length of wire with trembling precision. This segment repeats the signal endlessly, feeding upon its own echo. A perfect loop. "Can you stop it?" He gave a grim smile. "Every loop has a flaw, Watson. We need only interrupt the circle at its weakest point." He followed the line to a junction box bolted into the wall, where a faint blue light pulsed like a mechanical eye. Holmes examined it closely. Silver core, mercury solder. Ingenious. It not only reflects vibration, it remembers it. I blinked. Remembers. Sound etched into metal, like grooves upon a phonograph. Clee created an archive of resonance. Itself. Destroying it may erase more than his work. It may silence everything recorded upon this frequency, including... Us. Us? I repeated. He looked up, eyes grave. If every voice, every vibration within range was imprinted before collapse, then to break the loop could extinguish all that remains of this moment's sound, the echo of our own existence within it. I felt an absurd chill. Then what choice do we have? The same as ever, he said softly. To act. He drew from his pocket the battered tuning fork, the survivor of Vienna's chaos, and struck it once against the floor. The pure tone filled the vault, high and unwavering. The humming wire trembled violently in response. Watson, hold the lantern steady. When I apply the counter-frequency, the feedback will... The light flared. A sharp crack split the air. The coil burst, spraying silver dust that glittered in the lamplight like snow. The hum died, only to return, softer, mocking. Holmes swore under his breath. He's built multiple layers. This one only triggers the next. The superintendent staggered back. It's alive. Holmes turned, eyes fierce. No, merely persistent. Klee's genius was not animation, but duplication. He anticipated interference and designed harmony beyond reach of ordinary counterpoint. He paced rapidly, mind racing aloud. He used silver for its purity. Its acoustic memory is unmatched. The solution cannot be to destroy, but to complete the phrase. The loop must find its cadence. You intend to finish the melody? Exactly. A resonance incomplete will always seek continuation. By providing its conclusion, we release it. He raised the tuning fork again, but instead of striking it, he hummed, a low, steady tone that matched the lingering hum. Slowly, he raised his pitch, climbing half a note at a time. The two sounds met, twisted, and began to merge into one. The vibration softened. The metallic drip ceased. Holmes closed his eyes, still humming, adjusting minutely. Sweat glistened on his brow. Now, Watson, he gasped, strike the fork at C. I obeyed. The note joined his voice, and for a moment the vault was filled with pure harmony. Neither sound nor silence, but balance. The wire shimmered, liquefying where it ran along the wall. A flash of blue erupted, then darkness swallowed it whole. When the sound finally died, the air seemed heavier, as though the room itself had exhaled after holding its breath too long. Holmes sank against the wall, exhausted. It is done. I knelt beside him. You've silenced it at last. He smiled faintly, though his expression held a strange weariness. No, my dear Watson. Not silenced. Resolved. Every composition must end somewhere. We have merely reached the tonic. The superintendent approached cautiously. The instruments are still. Should I restore power? Holmes considered. Not yet. The city must wake slowly, or the wires. We'll dream again. He rose unsteadily, brushing dust from his coat. There will be reports of faint humming across London tonight. Ignore them. They're only ghosts of frequencies past. We stepped into the corridor. The lamps flickered to life one by one, hesitant as if afraid of their own glow. Holmes paused by the doorway, listening. Do you hear that? I strained my ear. Only the muffled rhythm of distant footsteps reached us. Normality, he said softly. The rarest of sounds. We emerged into the open street. The city was calm, its usual noise subdued as if the populace sensed how near they had come to dissolution. Dawn was breaking, and the first tram bell chimed faintly in the distance. Holmes regarded it with quiet wonder. An honest clang of brass, he murmured. No hidden resonance, no phantom tone, simply a bell. You look almost disappointed, I said. He smiled faintly. A detective who listens for mysteries must occasionally endure silence, Watson, but never trust it to last. At that instant, a telegraph clerk came running from the General Post Office, a sheet of paper clutched in his hand. Mr. Holmes, urgent, it just printed itself. No operator on the line. Holmes took it. The message was short, Unsigned and chilling, the melody concludes when you stop listening. He folded the sheet, slipped it into his pocket, and turned toward me. "Watson," he said quietly, "perhaps some echoes are patient." A faint metallic resonance answered from somewhere deep below. One solitary chime, unmistakable and deliberate, rising through the pavement like a final note demanding encore. Holmes's eyes met mine. "And there, my friend," he said, "is the coda." The sound lingered, thin and perfect, until the dawn itself seemed to tremble. The chime faded into the morning haze, so faint it might have been imagination, or memory refusing to end. Holmes stood quite still, his gaze fixed on the cobblestones as though deciphering a code written in vibration itself. "Do you feel it, Watson?" he asked at last. "That trembling beneath the feet?" The city breathed differently now. I listened. There was nothing overt, no hum or pulse, only a suggestion, an echo that was not sound but sensation. Residual energy from the wires, perhaps. He shook his head. "No. London is recalibrating. We have altered its heartbeat." The notion unsettled me. Then we've not destroyed Clee's invention, only incorporated it. Holmes gave a short, weary laugh. "Every great evil leaves residue, my friend. The best we can hope for is to tune it to something human." We walked together down Ludgate Hill. The fog of early morning hung low, muffling the bells of St. Paul's. Holmes's stride was unhurried now, but his eyes darted from railings to lamp posts to the faint sheen of dew on the pavement. Always listening. At last he said, "You recall how Alder's Teacup first sang to us? It was never merely an object. It was a message. From Clee to Alder, from Alder to me. A chain of frequencies, each passing its burden forward." "And now?" I asked. He glanced toward the cathedral dome, where the wind caught a faint metallic whisper from the weather vane. "Now the burden rests with the city itself, and perhaps with us." We reached Baker Street by midday. Mrs. Hudson, pale but composed, met us at the door. "You're back, then. The gas lights have been odd this morning, buzzing, like flies trapped in glass." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. "A harmless aftershock," he said gently. "London will hum for a day or two, nothing more." Inside, our sitting room felt strangely foreign. The walls carried a faint vibration as though remembering the resonance of Vienna. On the mantel stood the same silver teacup, untouched since that first morning. Holmes approached it slowly. "Curious," he murmured. "It remains cold, yet still it sings." I frowned. "I hear nothing," he smiled faintly. "Because it is no longer in the air, Watson. Some tones move inward." He set the cup upon the table and struck its rim lightly with a pencil. The note was pure, sustained, faintly mournful. "There," he said softly. "A relic of sound, a whisper of what nearly was." He poured a measure of tea into it, then raised the cup to his ear, listening not to liquid but to the faint vibration within the metal. After a long pause, he set it down. "She is gone," he said, "the lady who died from this cup. Her death began the melody, and now it ends where it began." I studied him, sensing a melancholy that had nothing to do with triumph. "You've saved the city, Holmes. Perhaps the world." He did not answer at once. "And yet, Watson, what is salvation but another form of interference? We impose silence upon chaos and call it peace. But silence, too, has a cost." He looked out toward the street where a lamplighter passed, humming unconsciously to himself. The tune was simple, human, entirely unscientific. Holmes smiled faintly. That's the proper key. Ordinary life resuming." He sat, taking up his violin, the old, unremarkable one, scarred and mellow from years of thought. "If Clee sought to command the world through harmony," he said, "then I shall remind it how imperfection sounds. He began to play. The notes were uneven, halting, tender. They filled the room with warmth rather than precision. The vibration that had haunted us seemed to soften, yielding to something older and kinder. Even the silver cup ceased its faint shimmer as if soothed. When he lowered the bow, there was genuine silence. No hum, no echo, only the sigh of settling wood and the faint tick of the clock. Holmes placed the violin aside. "You see, Watson, the world is never silent by nature. Silence must be earned," I said quietly. "And you've earned it tonight." He looked at me with that rare human gentleness that came only after the chase. "Perhaps. But remember, every silence conceals a tone. The question is whether one chooses to hear it." A gust of wind slipped through the half-open window, stirring the curtain. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimed noon. Clear, solitary, unadorned. Holmes listened until it faded. "There," he said, almost smiling. "The world holds its pitch again." He rose, reached for his pipe, and added softly, "But if ever London hums once more, you will know where to find me." I watched him strike a match, the flare briefly illuminating his face. The thinker, the listener, the man who could read meaning in silence. Outside, the city resumed its ordinary din, carriage wheels, voices, the bark of a distant vendor. And yet beneath it all I fancied I still heard one faint echo, an almost imperceptible chime, rising and falling like a heartbeat at peace. Whether it came from memory or from metal, I cannot say. Only that it was beautiful, and it was final.